Don't be in the dark about programs from the Open University. The Ozone magazine gives you a complete guide with full listing information and much more. For your free copy, call us or log on to our website.
There's poetry in motion on BBC Learning Zone now as Chris Packham gets under the skin of land animals and their wild moves.
Have you ever noticed how lazy animals can be? Lions often spend all day resting, conserving energy. They only rouse themselves when it's time to hunt. The same holds true for most animals. They move for a reason, and more often than not, that reason has something to do with food. Either travelling to get it, or trying to avoid becoming it. Now, to move, every animal has to expend hard-won energy. So it would seem sensible that when you do move, you move as efficiently as possible. Why then don't all land animals look the same or move in the same way? Do the largest only ever walk whilst others run? Are there limits to using 2 or 4 legs? And what do we really know of the secrets that lie behind how animals move?
Horse racing is a multi-million-pound business, so it won't surprise you that a huge amount of interest and investment has gone into understanding how horses gallop and what can be done to make them do it faster. But horses have also come to the attention of scientists who've found them to be an excellent model in their attempts to understand how other animals run too.
How's our grill today? Hello.
One of those scientists, Don Hoyt, is working at Cal State Poly at Pomona in California. By training horses to run on a treadmill, Don and his colleagues are unravelling some of the mysteries of how animals move at different speeds.
Animals can run at a variety of different speeds because they use different gaits. And an animal can increase speed either by increasing stride frequency, which is the number of strides they take per second, or by increasing stride length, which is how far they travel during a single stride cycle. When an animal is walking, the stride length is limited. However, if they add in a suspension phase, that is a period of time when all the feet are off the ground, then they can significantly increase stride length. And that's what happens in a trot. When the animal trots faster, that duration of that suspension phase increases, and therefore stride length increases, and they can go faster. It's a little bit less stable than a walk, and therefore there's a slight increase in the chance of the animal falling. Another factor is that when they increase speed, the forces exerted on their musculoskeletal systems will increase, and those increases in forces increase the probability of injury to the animal.
Horses have evolved their own form of shock absorbers that help reduce the risk of injury when moving fast. The fetlock joint flexes under the animal's weight, cushioning its footfall. As it flexes, it also stretches an elastic ligament, and this acts like a spring, storing up energy that's recycled as the fetlock recoils, helping the horse to move forward.
Horses are designed to save energy in a number of different ways. Like most large runners, they use elastic structures like ligaments and tendons to store and release elastic energy. And one of those is the fetlock. Another one is the aponeurosis, which is a large sheet-like tendon that extends across the middle of the lower back. And the third one would be the tendons of most of the large muscles, which can stretch and store elastic energy. In a horse, this has been estimated to reduce the metabolic expenditure of running at a high-speed gallop by as much as 30%. And here's how it works. When the animal's foot first hits the ground, the leg flexes. And as the foot passes underneath the body, the leg then extends. That flexion and extension of the leg effectively shortens the leg and then lengthens it, allowing the height of the center of mass to remain relatively constant. We used to think that this flexion and extension of the joints was produced by a shortening and then lengthening of the muscles. However, what we now know is that the muscles don't change length very much. And what's actually happening is the tendons are increasing in length, stretching, and then shortening up again. And that conserves energy.
The intriguing thing is that even though horses can travel at any speed between a slow walk and a full-blown gallop, when left to their own devices, they don't. For each gait, they appear to move at a preferred speed.
Preferred speed refers to the behavioral tendency of an animal to use a relatively narrow range of speeds in the middle of a much broader range of speed they can use in a particular gait. For example, our horses can trot at any speed from between 2 and 5.5 meters per second. But when we allow them to choose their speed, they choose a speed between about 3 and 3.25 meters per second. Now, the way in which we ask the animals what their preferred speeds are is we train them to execute a fairly simple behavior, which is simply to go from point A to point B, and then time how fast they're going while they're making the trip. Doesn't matter how fast they go, they will be rewarded if they complete that trip. Now, what we have found from these studies is that not only do they have very narrow range of speeds that they prefer, but the speeds that they prefer when loaded and when going up a hill are lower than the ones when they are traveling on the level.
Don's observations may help explain why most pregnant animals seem to move so slowly, covering large distances at a leisurely walk.
Finally, we've discovered that under all three of those conditions, the energy cost of locomotion is a minimum at the preferred speed. You might wonder how we know that the preferred speed is energetically the most economical speed. Well, we measure the animal's rate of oxygen consumption by having it run on a treadmill wearing a loose-fitting mask. We pull air through that mask at a known rate, and we use a device that tells us how much oxygen the animal has removed from the air. And then we can calculate the animal's rate of energy utilization from that.
As the horse moves faster, accelerating up through its gait changes, it appears to use more energy. When you think about it, that's no great surprise, but Don has found it only holds true until you measure how far the horse has actually travelled.
When we compare the energy cost at preferred speed in walking and trotting, we find that those energy costs are the same. So it doesn't cost an animal any more to trot at its preferred speed than to walk at its preferred speed if we calculate that cost in the energy per unit distance covered. And the explanation of that is simply, even though the metabolic rate of the animal trotting is higher, it's going to complete the trip sooner, so it's paying that cost for less time, and the total cost for the trip ends up being the same.
In many ways, gaits act like the gears of a car. They're an elegant means for reducing costs at a given speed. And in purely energetic terms, it doesn't seem to matter how fast you travel, as long as you can move at your preferred speed.
Whilst horses are certainly very good runners, they're not the record breakers of the natural world.
The American pronghorn is a supreme endurance athlete, covering distances of 20 kilometres or more at speeds of 50 kilometres per hour. Its fleet-footed stamina evolved to help it outrun pursuit predators on the wide open prairies where it lives. But for pure speed, there is only one winner. The cheetah is the fastest land animal of all. With explosive acceleration and a top lick of around 110 kilometers per hour, it is the consummate sprinter. To help reach such speed, it has an exceptionally flexible spine that arches whilst running to dramatically extend its stride. As the cheetah eats up the ground, all 4 feet are in the air for more than half the time. And at full throttle, it appears to be flying. But this performance is costly. The cheetah has little endurance and its muscles produce so much heat that it rapidly overloads the cooling system, sending its temperature soaring above 40 degrees Celsius to almost lethal levels. Once the chase has begun, it's a race against time to make the kill before its body packs in. After the chase, exhaustion takes over. It may need 20 minutes to cool down and to catch its breath. Cheetahs may not be alone in having to cope with the dangers of overheating. At the Audubon Zoo in New Orleans, Vaughan Langman has been studying elephants and believes that temperature may play a vital role in their behaviour and how they move.
When we look at size ranges of animals, we see that there are very small animals who avoid heat and they hide. And this accounts for the majority of mammals. Most mammals weigh much less than 10 kilos. Then we see there are medium-sized animals. And these animals will sweat and they'll pant. Dogs and cats will pant, humans sweat. Some animals do a little bit of both. And then we move to a size range which is so isolated and specialized that it is almost completely off the charts, and that's the size range occupied by elephants. What we are looking at is how elephants have been designed, in fact, how all big species have been designed. We are interested in locomotion, we're interested in anatomy, and we're interested in biophysics, how they're exchanging heat.
Part of Vaughan's study involves hooking an elephant up to a speedometer and using thermal sensors to measure where heat builds up as it exercises. But his work has also given him an insight into what it costs the elephant to walk.
I'm going to slide it back as far as possible. When you're measuring walking, what you do is you look at the minimum cost of transport. That means how much does it cost me, metabolically, to move a kilo of an animal a meter. And elephants have the lowest cost of transport of any terrestrial species. The gait isn't any more efficient than it is in humans. But because the elephant is extraordinarily large and has a very low metabolic rate, their costs of transport or movement are very small.
Elephants may be winners in the energy stakes, but in becoming so big, there's a price they've had to pay. They appear to be stuck in first gear.
In most species, when it becomes too expensive to walk, they gallop. Now, in normal species, the cost would then drop. In this species, we walked them faster and faster and faster and faster, and all that happened was their energy consumption went skyrocketing, showing that they refused or could not, in fact, change the gait. All they did is walk faster and faster.
3.
The elephant doesn't have the bounce that you would get from your muscles, used like springs. He doesn't have these springs. And so without them, evolution has taken away any possibility of running.
But there is another reason why elephants can't run.
Elephants have very small bones compared to their body mass. And so their column legs are very good for walking and very efficient in walking. But when it comes to galloping, the weight, the vertical force put on these legs would be as much as 10,000 or even 15,000 kilos, and that would shatter the bones. So the elephants can't run, but can walk about as fast as most species can run.
The nearest any elephant gets to running is when it's young. But by the time it's a few years older and a few kilos heavier, things have changed. A full-grown bull African elephant can weigh up to 6 tons, but that doesn't stop him from reaching 30 kilometers per hour, and all of this at a fast walk. Elephants only charge when they really have to. Most of the time, they walk at a more sedate pace. This may be the cheapest and safest way of getting around, but Vaughan has uncovered another factor that might be slowing them down.
These large creatures have some very odd design factors for losing heat. They cannot sweat, they cannot pant, and so these elephants have to store heat in the body tissue if they're going to move long distances.
Heat-sensitive cameras show their ears acting as cooling radiators, but it seems that even this heat loss is not enough to keep their bodies from heating up during the day.
But if you're going to put heat away, then you have to get rid of it later on. So for every positive storage, you've got to have a loss of heat from the body. So the question is not whether or not they do put heat away, they do. The question is, what do they do with it? How do they get rid of the heat so they can face each day cool enough to start again and start storing?
Vaughan's measurements have shown that an elephant can heat up by 3.5 degrees Celsius during the day. He suspects they then dump the heat in the cool of the night, so that by morning their body temperature is about 35 degrees, some 2 degrees cooler than most other mammals, and cold enough to put a human in hospital.
Most people just accept this as the way elephants are. The question is, why in the world do you get up in the morning cold? Why not just keep your temperature up? You have the ability to do this as a mammal. And we believe it's because they're getting ready every morning to go out and work for a living. They're getting ready to go out and forage. And these searches are going to require locomotion and internal heat gain. Heat they store and may not be able to lose until evening. And if that's the case, then it's going to limit what they do.
Even so, elephants are still prodigious travellers, walking hundreds of kilometres across the African plains.
Now, to you or I, walking might seem like one of the most natural things in the world, because we can do it quite literally without thinking about it. But it's more complicated than that, and it's only when we begin to examine it closely that we can really work out how walking works.
As I walk, my body rises up and down. This lifting accounts for most of the energy used during walking. But because each leg acts like a swinging pendulum, the energy needed is kept to a minimum, as the pendulum transfers the energy of forward motion from one stride to the next. On flat, even ground, this swinging helps to make walking an economical way of getting around, because only a little extra energy is needed during each step to keep the legs moving.
There's still a lot we don't fully understand about walking, but one of the big questions is how and why we came to walk on 2 legs rather than 4.
Plankendael Animal Park in Belgium houses one of the world's largest groups of bonobos outside their natural home in Central Africa. Bonobos are our nearest living relatives, and Peter Aerts from the University of Antwerp hopes they might hold the key to understanding the difficulties our ancestors overcame as they began to walk upright 5 million years ago.
Several theories exist about the reason why we humans evolved this 2-leg walking and running. There are theories on load carrying, that we had to bring food to our family members or we had to carry children. Other theories say that climbing is a kind of a pre-adaptation. This means that when we climb, we exert most of the force with the hind legs, and when we walk on 2 legs, we have to support the entire body weight with these 2 legs as well. Now, unfortunately, we cannot study our ancestors anymore, and therefore we will use the bonobo as a model species, because we believe that the environment where the animals are living now is identical, at least to a large extent, to the environment about 5 million years ago. So if this is true, then we can expect that also the morphology or the design of the animals has not changed that much over the last 5 million years. This can be combined with the fact that the body proportions of the bonobo are almost the same as the body proportions of early hominids.
Bonobos may be like our ancestors in many ways, but they are fundamentally different in one way. Even though they can walk upright, they usually don't.
Bonobos clearly prefer to walk on 4 legs, but for about 2% of their behavior they start walking on 2 legs. And they do this especially when they start looking for food and start to gather small pieces of fruits, flowers, just like they do in nature.
If they can walk upright, why don't they do it more often? Well, in the dense, tangled forest of their homelands, there may be no advantages in doing so. But is their body design also limiting their walking ability? It's a question that's led Peter and his team to construct a unique experimental setup.
For our experiments, we combined several techniques. When the bonobos leave their indoor enclosure, they have to walk over a kind of a catwalk, which is instrumented on the one end by force plates, which record the forces exerted by the feet on the ground, and on top of these force plates we have pressure pads, and these pressure pads gives us a very detailed idea of the pressure distribution under the feet of the animals.
This computerized footprint shows the pressure is greatest under the heel.
Well, we induce walking on 2 legs in the same way as it occurs in nature, in fact. We offer them small pieces of fruit, apple, banana, and they start gathering these pieces. Now, next to these techniques, we also have 3 cameras videotaping the movement patterns of the animals when they walk over the catwalk. And all combined, we will use this data to compile a biomechanical model, a computer model. The output of this model will tell us something about the forces, the stresses which occur inside the body, at the level of the joints, at the level of the muscles, at the level of the skeletal elements during walking and during running in the bonobo.
The studies are still in their early stages, and the exact reasons for the bonobo's reluctance to walk upright remain uncertain. But Peter does have some initial ideas of the factors that may be influencing them.
There are several possibilities why bonobos don't like to walk on 2 legs. First, there is the theory that because of the bent knee, bent hip posture of these animals, that it's too strenuous for their muscles to walk over long distances on 2 legs. One can also think about problems with stability. They are not used to it. They are used to walk on 4 legs, not on 2 legs. Another theory is that the stresses inside the body, at the level of the muscles, the joints, the bones, the ligaments, are simply too high to walk over long distances on 2 legs.
By identifying the biomechanical challenges that confront bonobos today, Peter believes we may eventually discover the hurdles our early ancestors overcame when they took their first steps out of the primeval forests.
Aside from walking, of course, there is another way by which 2-legged animals get around, hopping, and it's something that's inspired designers to come up with these. Frankly, they may look the part, but I think I'm going to leave hopping to the experts.
Hopping is a surprisingly common way of getting around. And one group of animals, kangaroos, has elevated it to an art form. The largest can reach 50 kilometers per hour and cover 12 meters in a single bound.
But why should hopping be so popular? Well, in Australia, where these creatures come from, studies of these master hoppers have been trying to find out.
One thing they've discovered is that kangaroos have unique and extraordinary abilities. This has led Russ Bordernet at the University of Adelaide to look at how land animals move in a completely new light.
Work on these animals has told us that muscles are serving a different function.
In the past we thought if you moved a muscle, you moved a limb. Now in some cases that's fine, but there are now some quite clear cases where if you contract a muscle, you really stretch a tendon and you turn a tendon into a spring. This is a whole new way of looking at muscle activity. Kangaroos are different from most other animals. They only have two gaits. They move pentapedally and then they move bipedally, but that's about it. They've only got this one change in gearbox. Many other animals have got walks and trots and gallops and bounds and half bounds, all sorts of complex things. The pentapedal gait is when they move slowly. They move by using their tail and four legs. There have been some measurements of what this costs to move around. It appears to be quite expensive.
But Russ's studies have shown that when kangaroos start to hop, things become very different indeed.
Come on, sweetie. We've done some measurements of wallabies hopping on treadmills and we know how much oxygen it takes to hop. It turns out to be incredibly inexpensive. It's cheap. There have been comparisons done with dogs running on treadmills that have the same body weight as our wallabies. And these animals consume energy at about half the rate that a dog of the same body size does. Now, you might ask why, in fact, we get this incredible efficiency. We think it's because they've got springs in their back legs. Rather than using energy to do work, these animals recycle energy. We've shown that the springs in these animals are, in fact, the tendons. They're superbly designed things, and they can store about 70 or 80% of the energy that they invest in the step, and they get it back again.
This system is so efficient that once they're up and hopping, kangaroos can go faster and faster without using up any more energy.
These animals have got this ability to uncouple how much energy they require in speed. In other words, if you drew a graph of speed against oxygen consumption, it would be a straight, flat line.
This relationship is unlike that of any other land creature. But why is it unique to kangaroos? The answer may be buried in their evolutionary past, but could the pressures that drove them to become so efficient have come in part from where they live?
The characteristic about Australia is that energy and water are very unpredictable. So if in fact you have a system like that, it pays to have a system in which you are not investing very much energy in locomotion. If you can save about half your cost, it's a good thing. And these guys seem to have done it.
There's one more surprise that kangaroos have up their sleeves. But it didn't come to light until Russ looked at how mothers coped with the extra burden of a joey.
Kangaroos and wallabies can carry joeys around until they're about a year old. They can weigh up to about 25% of the weight of the mother. Now, if you put a 25% load on a dog or a horse, it'd cost 25% more energy to move. We've done some experiments where we loaded up some wallabies and hopped them on a treadmill. We loaded them up with little bits of lead shot, not with joeys. And we measured how much oxygen it takes to hop along. We worked out, in fact, that they can carry the young for free. Now, this is unlike all other animals. If you load animals up, it costs more to carry a load. These guys can carry these sorts of loads, but it doesn't cost them anything. It appears to be tied to the springs in the back leg. Everything comes back to these tendons in the back legs that are highly specialised for storing and recycling energy.
What we've uncovered so far is that animals have evolved a remarkable variety of ways of reducing the energy cost of getting around, perhaps none more so than the incredibly efficient wallabies and kangaroos. But the challenges of moving on land are constantly changing, and there's no doubt that many more secrets about how animals move remain to be explored.